Hi, I'm Amanda Riebel, licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as bipolar parent coach. And what we'll be talking about today is how to effectively parent your bipolar teen so they can be stable and successful in life. And so there's two types of parents who are raising bipolar teens. And as I talk about each type, decide for yourself which one you relate to the most. So the first type I like to call overwhelmed and struggling parents. So you may struggle with daily life feeling unpredictable and unmanageable. Oftentimes, routines and schedules go out the window because it's hard to know what's going to trigger your teen. And even if you do start to see the warning signs, you can't always stop things from escalating. Now, rarely do things feel balanced. Their sleep is all over the place. Your sleep is all over the place, for example. Sometimes they're really up in energy. Sometimes they're extremely low in energy. There's lots of power struggles popping up between the two of you. You just want them to get better. And you also spiral into a panic, wondering if they'll ever get better. You're trying to help your team manage their illness, but you feel like you're at a dead end. Or maybe you feel this way. You believe you're failing as a parent. You spend a lot of time thinking about what you could have done differently. You often blame yourself, wondering if you or your spouse's genetics possibly played a role in their bipolar disorder developing. And you have so many feelings: grief, anger, resentment, guilt, sorrow, fear. And you feel stuck in these negative emotions. You don't know what is normal anymore. At times, you know your kid, but at other times, they seem unrecognizable. And so you swing between overreacting and then freezing up and not knowing what to do. And you may think more and more that you're not up for the job of parenting your child. Or maybe you find yourself in this situation. Most or all of your relationships are deteriorating, and your bipolar child's needs have taken priority over everything else. You're exhausted. You have very little time and energy left over to connect with the people you love and value. And you've lost friends along the way. They either didn't understand your child's struggles, they judged you, or they just didn't have the capacity to show up for you the way you needed them to. Maybe you've had to distance yourself from family and friends. They often give you advice on how to parent your child, and they also guilt trip you for apparent mistakes you've made. If you have other children, you may feel like your relationships with them are strained. And they may feel like your teen gets special treatment and that it isn't fair that your teen gets to do more things that they want to do. Your other children may be at the mercy of the teen's behavior. Maybe your teen yells, manipulates them, or at times is physical with their siblings. Maybe you and your partner's relationship are strained. You and your partner, if applicable, may disagree on how to handle your teen's behavior, leading to arguments. One of you might take on more of the emotional burden, which creates resentment. Date nights, intimacy, deep conversations get replaced by exhaustion, fighting, and constant problem solving. You don't even feel like yourself anymore. You don't remember the last time you were able to fully relax and do your own thing. Even if you did have time for it, you would end up worrying about how things were going at home or at school. If any of these descriptions clicked with you, perhaps you are an overwhelmed and struggling parent. And so I just want to talk about how there's another type of parent who is raising bipolar teens, and I like to call them effective and hopeful parents. And so one way that they've gotten to where they are is that they have a lot of knowledge and they understand bipolar disorder. They understand that this is a chronic illness, and they understand how the illness uniquely manifests in their teen. They've explored their own preconceived notions about the disease and have more acceptance that the disease very well will be lifelong, but it doesn't mean that their child will fail at life. They understand that their teen's brain is still developing and that not only are they parenting a typical teen, they're also parenting a teen who lives with bipolar. They know what they can do to help their teen and are also open to new ways to supporting their teen. Life no longer feels like a series of daily battles, and they have more hope that things can get better. So these parents, because they've learned how to parent effectively, now can focus on creating a peaceful, loving, and calm home environment. They know how to establish and tweak routines to fit the needs of their teen and their other children. They understand how necessary it is to remain calm, especially when their teen is escalating. They pick their battles with their teen to reduce how often conflict happens. As much as they can, they try to keep a low sensory home, keeping clutter at a minimum and trying to reduce overstimulation. They set realistic boundaries, wanting their teen to have responsibilities, yet also giving accommodations when that is needed. These parents look for the moments of joy, fun, and laughter. They celebrate wins on a daily basis, and those wins may look different depending on the day. They realize not every conversation has to be about their child's illness, that their child is more than their illness. Also, these parents understand the treatment options and how to advocate for their child. These parents can navigate really complex systems, the systems of the medical system, the school system, inpatient, outpatient, residential systems, all of the therapy options, medication options. So they understand the nuances of how to advocate and how to show up for their child. They're essentially the manager of a team. They understand that the goal is to move their teen towards stability and wellness, and they do so without feeling chronically exhausted and burned out. They use the 3 Ps, being prepared, proactive, and powerful. And they've taught their teens some ways to advocate for themselves and yield when the teen wants to do that for themselves. They no longer that they feel like the illness is controlling them, and the parents have a certain amount of control over the illness. So these parents are also the people who have time and resources to focus on relationships, self-care, and personal growth. They prioritize their own wellness and know that taking care of their self means they can also take better care of their child and loved ones. Many do some sort of daily self-care. And these parents find other parents who are raising bipolar children and feel less alone because they interact with people who get it. And they shifted their mindset and know it takes many people to help their child, not just them. They find ways to connect with their other children. They make efforts to go on date nights with their spouse. And these parents have found it easier to work, play, and love once the bipolar is being successfully treated. So what these effective parents are doing is they have learned how to parent through the bipolar. And so when I say parenting through the bipolar, what does that mean? That means that they know what to do when, they know how to do it, while also keeping an eye on their own well-being. It also means bringing their teen back towards wellness or bringing their teen towards balance. So now let's take a look at the steps you all need to understand to be able to follow this path for yourselves as well. So how parents got results. They first learned in detail how the illness cannot be parented with traditional parenting techniques. They also became treatment experts, understanding how to meet their child's needs. They also created support systems so the family bond remains strong even in the most difficult periods. So this presentation is about you, but I want to take a moment to introduce myself properly to let you know that I'm teaching this from a place of experience, not just from professional results, but also from personal experiences. So why listen to me? Well, I'm both a licensed mental health therapist and I'm also a person living with bipolar disorder. So I know firsthand how difficult it can be for parents to navigate bipolar. Keeping your cool and parenting wisely when your teen is unstable is, in my opinion, one of the hardest parenting jobs out there. I also have 15 years of clinical experience serving children, teen, and adults with mood disorders, while also supporting the families impacted by the illness. I've worked in schools, facilities, as well as in private practice settings. I'm also a trained art therapist and yoga teacher. So I've seen real results that when families are informed, supported, and encouraged, they in turn can support, inform, and encourage their child in the most effective ways possible. So here's what happened for me. I was an adult, I still am, living with some long-term stability under my belt. My bipolar symptoms were under control, and I had structures built into place to help me manage when I noticed myself slipping towards or into an episode. My life wasn't just about being bipolar. It was birthdays, vacations, hobbies, work, family. I had a busy therapy private practice where I worked with many bipolar clients and their families. I always knew that therapy was only one star in the constellation of bipolar treatment. Just therapy and medication is usually not quite enough for the bipolar child as well as for the families. And I was hearing more and more troubling reports from clients during therapy sessions. 3 to 6 month waits for good psychiatrists that worked with bipolar teens, managed medications well. There was a scarcity in therapists specializing in bipolar, challenges finding group programs, not knowing how to navigate the educational system, not knowing who to ask, going in circles, trying so hard, yet not getting anywhere with the long list of needs. I agreed with them. Resources were scarce, and I was also struggling to find all the supports for them that they needed. During my times as a case manager, family liaison, child therapist, there was always a lack of abundant services, but over the past few years, it just seemed worse. More people were feeling more isolated and alone and helpless, And therapy wasn't going to radically change this. I didn't like hearing this because I knew support was crucial, and people seemed to be getting less and less of it, and their children were rapidly declining. Because I knew caseworkers were maxed, social workers were often hard to find, doctors, therapists, advocates had wait lists, I wondered if there was a bridge that could be out there, such as a coach. I wondered if any coaches were out there specializing in helping parents of bipolar teens. In my research, I couldn't find many or any. So I started asking myself, where are the coaches with this specialty? The parent plays such a crucial role in their teen's success, and parents are not being properly educated about how to successfully parent their child, even though they are the ones with their kid the most of the time. So I don't want this to happen to you. I don't want you to be struggling so much on a daily and moment-to-moment basis. This doesn't have to be a battle, but you need help. So as I continued to look for coaches, I also reflected on my time as a teenager. Although by midlife I had found stability and success, it took a very, very, very long time to get there. And there were times I almost didn't make it. Looking back on my time as a teen living with bipolar, I realized how much I and my parents could have benefited by having someone teach my parents how to parent me. Someone who had the puzzle pieces and could show my parents how to put the puzzle together to solve the bipolar problems. I know I wouldn't have struggled and been in as much pain for as long. If things had been streamlined, I would have found stability and success sooner. My parents, who did their best, were not well equipped to handle my ups and downs, self-harm, impulsivity, and substance use. So going back to where are the coaches questions, I didn't know. I knew something very specific wasn't there. And, there's a scarcity in general of qualified people to help typical teens. However, there's a double scarcity for specialists who work with bipolar teens. And so on top of that, there weren't many coaches specializing in working with the parents of bipolar teens. So as I looked around for coaches, I noticed the specialists who integrated coaching into their therapy practice were often located in one city and often only met with parents or teens in person. And I realized I wanted to work with as many parents as possible, teaching them in an efficient way, helping them problem solve and navigate what is, for many people living with bipolar, one of the toughest times, being a teenager and being a bipolar teenager. So bipolar is a cyclical illness, and parents can feel stuck in its vicious cycle with their child. Life is often just a series of stressful events. Your child's moods continue to loop out of control, and you're out of ideas on how to help, leaving you feeling trapped in an endless cycle of your own exhaustion, overwhelm, lots of emotions and reactivity. So like a roller coaster you are stuck on, you are also spinning in circles, and it can be hard to get out of this looping. Now, if there's a way to get off the roller coaster, you can then have enough distance to observe the roller coaster and figure out how to make it slow down and eventually stop so that your teen can also get off the roller coaster. So a big reason why parents end up stuck is because they often don't know what to do. Bipolar moods, energy, and behaviors move fast in teens. Often there's not a lot of time when they are at a baseline or seem pretty balanced. So it can be really hard on the parents to know what to do, what to look for. The list is long, and so they get stuck when they're out of ideas on how to help. And they're stuck because they care, because they're trying, but it's just not working. And I don't want to see any more parents who feel stuck, going in circles, feeling hopeless, sad, alone, overwhelmed, and just really afraid for their kids' future. Because you deal with the most challenging aspects of this illness, because you're around your teen oftentimes when they're out of school and they've held it all in and they're going to blow, or you see them in the morning when they're struggling, or you just know how hard their life is. I don't want parents to suffer as much as I see them doing. I'm dedicated to this, and my mission is to teach as many parents as possible, helping them to parent efficiently and successfully, no matter where their teen is in their illness. So from my personal experiences as a teen living with bipolar, I understand what teens truly need. From my professional experience, I know the steps parents must take to support their child effectively. So breaking the cycle of suffering includes some of these ideas. So education, identification of the symptoms and the problems, preparation, prevention, planning, adjusting expectations, communication skills, advocacy, stress management, building community, rebuilding relationships, and celebrating daily wins. So this is Melanie and her daughter Stevie, and I'm using a stock photo and I've changed the names. But Melanie was a single mom I worked with who went from overwhelmed, depressed, and lost to feeling empowered and confident. So Melanie's daughter Stevie was having some problems and experiencing a lot of depression, irritability, a lot of anger, rage, self-harm stuff, and risky impulsive behaviors. So Melanie came to me because she was out of ideas on how to help her daughter, as her daughter was becoming more and more unstable and getting worse. So over the course of time we met, Melanie became well educated on her daughter's disorder. She kept logs of her daughter's moods, figuring out the warning signs of a mood event. She then created prevention plans for Stevie's mood episodes to try to keep the moods from escalating. She learned how to prepare for doctor's visits, what kind of questions to ask providers, information to give, and how to advocate for Stevie. Melanie learned new communication skills, how to discuss medication with Stevie, how to remain calm when Stevie was completely dysregulated, and how to create a safety plan for the self-harm issues. She also learned ways to advocate for Stevie at school, how to communicate with her teachers, get a 504 plan put in place, and become more flexible in what success looked like from day to day. Stevie started doing much better. She was more balanced, stable, happier. Self-harm was no longer happening. Her sleep schedule was much better, and she was doing better at school. So all the effort Melanie put into the work really paid off. She and her daughter began spending more quality time together. They watched movies, they laughed more, and Stevie started to open up more about her relationships, what experimentation she was doing, and worries about her own future with her mom. Melanie was then able to focus on doing the things she loved, which was going for walks, trying to rekindle friendships, and make new friendships. She was able to devote more time and energy to her job, which then created more financial stability. So you know your child best, even if they are unrecognizable at times. But this doesn't mean you know exactly how to parent them, especially when they're having a mood episode. So let's now dig into the fundamental building blocks we need to build around your teen so they can be stable and successful in life. Looking at step 1 or teaching point 1, we learn the foundations on how to parent through the bipolar. We need to know what bipolar is in order to better understand what your teen is living with, and also knowing what parenting approaches will help your teen move towards wellness. We start by learning more about the disease, how bipolar manifests in teens, what typical symptoms bipolar teens have, and how to figure out what symptoms your teen has. By charting the teen symptoms and finding possible patterns, we then learn how to recognize the early warning signs and teaching your teen the way to recognize these early warning signs on their own. So this begins to help them manage their mood swings. By learning, evaluating, and teaching our teens, we begin to create a parenting plan that will set you and them up for success. So let's begin to look at some common bipolar symptoms teens experience. Big mood changes and changes in behavior are common. Often mood swings seem to come out of nowhere. However, stress and relationships can be predictable triggers. Within mood swings are big emotions: irritability, rage, with depression, complaining of being bored, stomach aches, are common to see with teens. And sudden behaviors, such as isolating a lot in their rooms, is often an indicator of depression. Picking fights with you or their siblings that last for hours, and erratic academic work are some common behaviors we also see. One major indicator of bipolar has to do with sleep. Bipolar teens, as they are or are heading into mania, require very little to no sleep, yet they're still energized the next day. Now, at some point, the crash happens and the depression creeps in, and they either feel like they can't get enough sleep or they can't sleep, but they know they really, really need sleep. So if we can get their sleep schedule more regulated and on a better routine, this can be really helpful. And so to help them get in a better sleep routine, this often includes some sort of medication treatment. So some other ways to think about bipolar and bipolar symptoms is speech, thought, and movement. So with more mania energy, more amped up energy, your teen's speech is going to be fast, their thoughts are going to be quick, rapid fire, and their movement is also going to be fast. Now, with the other side of the spectrum, the depression, their speech is going to be slower. Their movements are going to be slower. Their thought process is going to be slower. So we also have more specific thinking styles. So for example, with manic energy, there's more grandiose thinking. And so grandiose thinking could be something like, I'm moving to LA, I'm going to totally get cast in a blockbuster film and just live my best life. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum with the depression, it's very hopeless thinking, like, I'll never amount to anything, my life's always going to suck, all of those hard thoughts to hear. So, activities and relationships often take a hit with bipolar. Now, during a depressive episode, your teen probably loses interest in activities they usually enjoy. They might not want to be around people, and just overall, they're irritable and withdrawn. Now, in an upswing of energy in that more manic phase, they may suddenly have new interests, more interests, come back to old interests. They might be very extroverted and may be more impulsive and reckless. So these ups and downs with relationships can make it hard to keep friends. And their academic work can also suffer. So due to difficulty focusing, caring about school, or falling behind in the work. So when bipolar swings are at their most severe, teens may begin to self-harm or be very aggressive towards others or be a harm to themselves. And so that's when hospitalization to keep them safe and to move them into stability is absolutely necessary. So let's talk a little bit about parenting strategies that won't work and parenting strategies that will work. So we'll look at the won'ts first. And so oftentimes consequences are a big theme with bipolar teens. And so oftentimes what won't work is punitive consequences and logical consequences. So for example, teen doesn't want to eat dinner. Okay, well, if you don't eat dinner, I'm going to take your phone away. Punitive consequence. Teen doesn't want to eat dinner. Okay, if you don't eat dinner, you don't get dessert. Logical consequence. Having high expectations consistently, consistent high expectations won't work because one day your teen can achieve these things and another day they can't. And encouraging self-motivation is not going to work because, for example, with a big depression crash, they're not going to be able to self-motivate on their own. So other aspects that won't work is trying to use logic to resolve outbursts or conflict. If your teen is in a big episode and they're really dysregulated, logic will not get through. Another thing that won't work are fluid routines, fluid sleep schedules. So bipolar teens need structure, they need routines, and ideally they have a very set sleep schedule. So also the belief that their teen's going to grow out of this phase. So for more typical teens, yes, they oftentimes do grow out of phases. It's a linear developmental process. However, with bipolar teens, this is not a phase. This is going to be most likely a lifelong illness. So other techniques that won't work are reward systems to reach a goal. So the problem with this is, say your teen can't reach that goal that day, they're probably going to feel a lot of shame and guilt if they don't get that reward, or they know, oh, I didn't do a good enough job. Parents being less hands-on with friendships won't work because parents need to keep an eye out for who the teen is hanging out with, especially if they're not achieving a lot of stability. So for example, if your daughter is in a hypomanic or manic episode, she's impulsive, reckless, wants to experiment, um, chances are she's probably not going to want to go out with friends that are doing the same thing. So you would want to find a way to try to keep her either at home that night or doing something else. So communication styles such as indirect, authoritarian, or permissive styles won't work. So the indirect is dancing around what's going on. The authoritarian is, if you don't do this, then this will happen. And then the permissive is just letting anything happen. So again, bipolar teens need structure, but not too much, not too little. So parenting that will work involve natural consequences. So natural consequences flow organically. So using the earlier example, if the teen doesn't want to eat dinner, don't make them. They'll most likely get hungry later, unless they're having a manic episode, and then they might not eat, which is a different topic. But basing expectations on how the teen is doing that day is very important because their abilities will vary from day to day. So again, if, for example, they don't want to eat dinner and you know they're manic, the expectation is, well, I expect they might not eat that much, and then maybe they'll eat more as they come down. So finding external structures for motivation is also a really important parenting skill because, say, for example, your teen is depressed, they're not going to have the energy to internally motivate themselves. So external motivation might look like, hey, let's put on some music that might get your energy up a little bit, or you want to go for a walk or sit outside in the sun. So it's external things that are changing their internal energy. So, co regulation, empathy, and observation are really important techniques to use to help your teen move through an outburst or an episode. So, by acknowledging what they are experiencing without judgment, trying so hard to stay calm when they're not calm, and observing to yourself what is happening will eventually lead them towards balance, and you can then problem solve together. So, you usually want to address their mood first, behaviors later, unless they're being extremely aggressive, harm to themselves, harm to somebody else, then you do need to address the behavior right away. So, also creating and implementing predictable routines, like I spoke about earlier, is really important because any type of routine is going to help their brain move towards balance, and it's going to help you so much as well. So, another topic of parenting that will work is advocacy. So, being an advocate with their doctors, their therapists, with teachers, with school administration is something you can do to help support them get the supports that they need. And then teaching your child how to manage their condition for the long term is extremely important. And so the way you teach it is through modeling through your own behavior, the structure we've talked about. And then also as they have more and more days in consistency with stability and wellness, you can start to teach them the more nuanced skills, such as learning how to do laundry, maybe having a really low stress, very part-time job, things like that. So there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful. And especially when we can catch the illness early on in their teens and begin parenting in a way that treats the illness, your teen has an amazingly great chance of finding stability sooner, which will set them up for long-term success. So now the next step, step two, is about how to become a treatment expert. So you fully understand what is being recommended for your child and have a complete view of all the available paths you can take and your teen can take. So there's lots of treatments that can move your teen towards wellness, stability, and independence. So very often medication is first in line with treating your teen because this is a brain disease and it works with brain chemistry. Oftentimes medication can bring your teen down to a baseline where then you can work on all the things I've talked about so far today. So therapy, such as individual therapy, so your teen can go talk to somebody who's in a non-judgmental role, who isn't a family member, isn't a friend, and they can just talk about whatever they want to talk about. Therapists can teach them new coping strategies, and they can also just wade through the complexity of this illness with an ally. So as we continue to get to know all the different treatment options you and your teen can find together or you can research for your teen, just remember these are all part of the building blocks that can create all the structure and success for your teen. So part of that is school, it's academics. And so finding a way to advocate for your teen and getting them what they need in the school environment. So that might look like what's called a 504 plan, an IEP, some sort of behavior plan, and educating teachers and staff about bipolar, about what it is, what it looks like, and what your teen is going through on a daily basis. So other treatment options include inpatient, outpatient, and residential treatment. And so this is when you have a moderate to severe situation going on with the illness. And so inpatient is hospitalization, a more intensive treatment to help your teen find the stability they need. Outpatient is they live at home, but they go to some sort of treatment center for a certain number of hours a day to, again, get that intensive treatment that they need. Now, residential options could be a residential school where they go to school and it's a specialized school that can help them, again, get the support they need. Or sometimes there's residential centers where they live in a housing situation that, again, gives them the intensive support that they need to move towards that stability. So also, enjoyable hobbies and friendships are a form of treatment. It's so therapeutic to be engaged in a passion that you enjoy and to feel good about either the process or the product that you're making from that hobby. And then enjoyable low-stress friendships can also be very therapeutic. You have social connection with somebody else, and social connection is a very important skill that all teens need to learn, but especially bipolar teens. So at some point, your teen may want to find a low-stress job, and that'll build a sense of agency and responsibility, and it very well could be another helpful routine. So also your teen at some point is going to want to have a say in things. They're going to want to have a say in what their therapy looks like, in what their treatment looks like, and how you talk to them. So that's probably already happening. And then finally, a therapeutic treatment is a calm and supportive home environment. And we'll get into that in lesson 3 a little bit more. But having a stable place can help your teen move towards stability. So, we want to find ways for you to be a successful advocate for your child. And in fact, providers rely on family members' reports, observations, and requests to develop a successful treatment plan. So, since you spend more time with your child than any provider does, when you bring in information about their moods, what their mood and behavior has been like in between sessions, how long it's lasted, how intense it was, all these things give the provider the information they absolutely need to, for example, tweak medication, practice a new coping skill in therapy, etc. So it's really important to know right away what you want to talk about, because sometimes with doctors, you have 15, 30 minutes. And so you want to be prepared, you want to be well-spoken, and work as a collaborative team. So it's really important to know what questions to ask the treatment team and also what requests you'd like to make. So again, it's a collaborative effort, but in a way you can also think of yourself as the manager of this treatment team so that you feel empowered and confident to advocate for your teen, but yet to also gain clarity around what's going on with their treatment. So if you're interested in pursuing supplements or more holistic strategies to help your teen system, to help your teen's symptoms, it's really important to do the research and talk with professionals about the pros and the cons of, say, for example, supplements, massage, acupuncture, diet change, etc. And again, you know your child best, even if sometimes they seem unrecognizable. You do. You know them the best. And so when you find the best treatment options, you're more likely to be in control of moving your child towards wellness. And being a parent of a bipolar teen, it can feel like things are out of control all the time. So the other thing is, remember, you don't always have to defer to medical or treatment advice. For example, if after you meet with a doctor for the first time, sort of a consultation, and the way the doctor talks about your teen is really upsetting, and say you end up in your car after the appointment and you're crying, chances are that's not going to be a good relationship for you or for your teen. And so you have the permission to keep looking for the right providers. Now let's go into step 3. So step 3 is all about relationships. And so what we want to do is create support systems for the entire family, including yourself, your partner, and your children, if you have other children, so the family bond remains strong, even in the most difficult periods. And I probably don't have to tell you that bipolar creates upheaval in families. It ripples to all who are connected with the teen. That's the nature of the disease. Part of the fundamental building blocks in support of your teen is finding the fine balance between getting more involved when your teen is in an episode and then less involved at other times. So it's a fine balance. And there's a dance of de-escalation techniques, problem solving, breaking things down into manageable actions, educating the family about the disease. There's so many ways you can move towards that fine balance. And most of these techniques involve you and your teen moving towards and developing a stronger bond. And there's also resources to support all members of the family. And we can develop simple ways to problem solve as families. And the first step is to define what the problem is and get everyone's opinions. Then, as a family, brainstorm all the possible solutions to the problem. And then we finally discuss and list the advantages and disadvantages of all possible solutions. So I'll just interject for a moment. And in the full coaching program, I'll have worksheets, I'll have handouts so that you can remember and dig a little deeper into these problem-solving techniques. So also, learning communication skills are really important, not only for your bipolar teen, but anybody else in the family. So if you have a partner or a spouse, practicing calm, empathetic communication skills is really important, because if you have a spouse, this disease can be so incredibly stressful on your relationship. And same goes for your other children if you have them. And so these communication strategies include expressing positive. So, amplifying, hey, I really appreciated when you said you liked my shirt. It includes active listening. So not interrupting the other person, looking at them as they talk, maybe nodding your head, asking clarifying questions after they finish talking, and then coming to some sort of conclusion. Another form of a healthy communication strategy is making requests for change in a way that doesn't make the other person defensive. And then finally, expressing negatives in a very nuanced way, in a very structured way, so that the negatives, again, don't create more conflict. And like I said in the last slide, I would have handouts. We would go into this a lot more in depth so that it makes more sense. So it's pretty common for your bipolar teen to feel, especially in a manic episode, like they have all the power in the family. And sometimes it can feel like your teen is controlling everybody in the house. So just remember, your teen doesn't run the show. You are the parent, you are the adult, and it's okay to set boundaries. And we can use different strategies when conflict is escalating. So this is just one example of a way to keep yourself calm and also set a boundary for your teen or anybody else in the family. It's just called exiting the situation. So if your teen is getting more and more amped up, maybe picking fights with you, and you're finding yourself getting more and more upset, you just exit the situation. Now, ideally, ahead of time, there's a space that everybody in the family knows that is mom's space, and we don't go in there when she needs to exit the situation. And oftentimes, when you come back after you've had time to think, breathe, decompress, your teen's also more calm. So, this is just an example of a way to navigate at times what is the family chaos. So going back to the kinds of support like we talked about in the lesson number 2 is getting support for the whole family. So again, that includes therapy, whether that's individual therapy for your children, your spouse, yourself. Maybe it's family therapy where the whole family comes together and a therapist or a doctor leads you all through a very specific structure to build more strength, resilience, and peace in your family. There's support groups. There's support groups for the bipolar teen, for the children, for the parents and other family and friends that it's peer support. So you go and you're around other people who get it, and you oftentimes find friendships, and you just feel better and you feel like you have more tools to deal. And that also is in line with social support. So again, social supports are so important so you don't feel like you're going through this all alone. That might be a trusted friend if you have a spiritual or religious practice, people involved in that practice. It can look a lot of different ways. So just to summarize, the 3 steps or lessons we covered today were learning the foundations of bipolar to create a comprehensive parenting plan, becoming a treatment expert to have a complete view of all available paths to take, and creating support systems for the entire family. Now, I hope you found this information helpful. So if you can see a link to schedule a call beneath this video, that means the doors to my program are currently open. And in the coming week or so, I'll be accepting my next 3 parents into the parenting program. Together, we will work to have you learn how to effectively parent your bipolar teen. Over the next 8 weeks, we will learn, grow, and implement your parenting plan. If you'd like to apply to the program, use the link below to schedule a time for us to talk. I look forward to meeting with you.